The night I drove my work rival home in the middle of a February storm, I kept the radio off the entire way. Not because I didn't know what to say. Because I knew that whatever she was holding together, one wrong word would be enough to break it. And she would never forgive herself for breaking in front of me. My name is Callum Reed. I was 32, a senior project manager at a mid-sized infrastructure consulting firm in Ottawa. We worked on transit contracts, municipal bids, the kind of work that sounds dry until you realize entire neighborhoods depend on whether your numbers hold up. For the past 18 months, my professional life had been measured against one person, Margot Voss. Margot was the kind of competent that made you check your own work twice before sending it anywhere near her. She wasn't aggressive about it. She didn't need to be. She read the room faster than most people read a slide deck, and she had this particular habit of asking the one question in a meeting that made the presenter realize they had answered everything except the thing that mattered. We competed for the same accounts, the same visibility, and eventually the same senior director position that had opened up after our VP retired in December. She had red-penned a risk assessment of mine in February. I had publicly questioned her phasing timeline on the Tremblay bid. She once wrote aspirational on a margin note in a draft I had submitted to our managing partner. I once told that same partner her contingency budget was either conservative or clairvoyant, and I wasn't sure which was worse. We made each other sharper. I told myself that was all it was. Then came the Dunmore dinner. Dunmore was the largest transit authority contract our firm had pitched in 4 years. After 11 weeks of proposals, revisions, and one presentation that ran 40 minutes over time, we won. The partners booked a private room at a steakhouse on Elgin Street, the kind of place where the wine list is longer than some reports I've submitted. And everyone arrives already, performing a version of themselves they're proud of. Margot sat diagonally across from me in a charcoal blazer and a dark burgundy blouse, her hair down for once instead of pulled back. She looked composed. She always looked composed. That was part of what made her difficult to compete against and, if I'm being honest, difficult to stop watching in a room. For the first hour, everything was normal. Toasts, laughter. The managing partner told a story about the pitch that grew more heroic with every retelling. Margot corrected a date he got wrong with a smile so polite it barely registered as a correction. I caught her eye across the table. She looked away first, but not before I saw the edge of something that was almost amusement. Then her phone lit up on the table. She checked it. Her face didn't fall exactly. It went neutral in the specific way people go neutral when they're trying not to let anything show. I noticed because I'd spent a year and a half reading Margot across boardroom tables, and I knew the difference between her thinking face, her annoyed face, and the face she wore when something landed somewhere she hadn't prepared for. She excused herself 5 minutes later. "Back in a sec," she said. Nobody paid attention. I did. She came back 10 minutes after that and ordered another glass of wine. Then, not long after, another. That was unlike her. Margot drank at work events the way she did everything else, carefully and with intention. 1 glass, maybe 1.5 if the room earned it. By the time dessert plates were being cleared, her eyes had gone too bright, and there was a tension in her jaw that had nothing to do with the conversation around her. Our colleague Brendan leaned toward me and said, quietly enough to feel conspiratorial, "Never seen Voss unwind before. Good for her." I looked at him. "That's not what that is." He laughed. He thought I was joking. I wasn't. The evening started to break apart around 10:30. Some people called cabs. A few moved toward the bar in the next room. Margot stood too quickly, steadied herself against the back of her chair. 2 junior analysts nearby noticed. One of them said something to the other. I couldn't hear, and both of them looked over in that way people look when someone usually untouchable seems suddenly reachable. One of them pulled out his phone. That was enough. I crossed the room, stepped in front of the angle he was going for, and said to Margot, loud enough to be casual, "I'll grab you a cab." She looked at me. Her eyes weren't quite focused, but the annoyance was still there. "I'm fine. I know. I'm going your direction anyway." That wasn't true. She lived in Centertown. I lived in Hintonburg. It wasn't the same direction by any reasonable definition. She stared at me for a moment, and then whatever she'd been using to hold herself upright seemed to shift slightly, and she said, "Okay." Outside, Wellington Street was wet and dark. snowplows having been through recently enough that the gutters were still rivers of gray slush. Margot stood under the restaurant's awning with her arms wrapped around herself, and I ordered an Uber on my phone without saying anything about it. "I'm not drunk," she said. "Okay, I mean it." I said nothing. She exhaled slowly. "You're not going to argue with me?" "No." She looked at me sideways, suspicious. "Why not?" "Because you'd win." That caught her off guard. I could tell. She turned away, toward the street, and I couldn't read her face anymore. The car arrived. I opened the door. She got in without my help, which mattered. I didn't offer. She gave the driver her address in a voice that was carefully precise, and then she rested her forehead against the passenger window and closed her eyes like that small performance had cost her something. We drove in silence through the downtown core. Slush, yellow light, late traffic. The windshield wipers made the only sound between us. Then, quietly, she said, "Don't tell them." I looked over. "Tell them what?" Her eyes stayed closed. "That I'm not holding it together." I waited. She didn't say anything else for a long minute. Then, my mum called during dinner. I stayed quiet. She has early-stage Alzheimer's. She was diagnosed 8 months ago. My brother and I are the only ones who know outside the immediate family. A pause. Tonight, she called me by my sister's name. My sister died 11 years ago. The car moved. I didn't say anything because there wasn't anything to say to that. Some things don't need a response. They need room. At her building, I walked her to the lobby. The concierge recognized her. She found her fob in her coat pocket without trouble, which seemed to matter to her. I rode the elevator up with her and walked her to her door because the hallway was long and the building was older, and I didn't feel right leaving her at a lobby that had 12 floors between it and her apartment. She got the key in on the first try. She stood in the doorway and looked at me for a moment with an expression I couldn't name. Something between gratitude and humiliation, and something else underneath both of those. "Why are you being this quiet?" she asked. "Because you'll remember enough of this tomorrow." Her face shifted. Something moved through it fast, and then it was gone. "Good night, Callum," she said. Her voice was lower than usual. "Careful." It was the first time she had used my first name without it sounding like a line item in a list of people she needed to outlast. I waited until I heard the deadbolt turn. Then I took the elevator back down, stood outside in the February cold for a moment, and called my own Uber. On the drive home, I couldn't stop hearing, "I'm not holding it together." I got to the office early the next morning. Coffee, clear desk, the faint headache of someone who hadn't slept as well as they'd planned. At 8:47, I heard a knock. Margot stood in my doorway in yesterday's blazer, hair pulled back too tightly, face pale. She looked like she had been awake since before the city woke up. For the first time in all the months I had worked beside her, she didn't look like my competitor. She looked like a person at the end of something. "Callum," she said. Her voice had a crack running through it. "Did I say anything to you last night that I should know about?" I stood. She held my gaze for 1 second. Then her composure broke, and Margot Voss started crying in my office doorway. I stepped past her, checked the hallway, no one nearby, and closed the door. She stood just inside, one hand pressed to her mouth, her shoulders rigid with the effort of trying to stop. I knew that effort. Not from her, from myself, from every moment I had decided being professional mattered more than being honest about what I was feeling. "Sit down," I said. "I'm fine, Margot." She sat. Not in the chair across from my desk. I hadn't gestured toward it, and I think she knew what it would feel like to sit there right now. She sat on the small sofa by the window, knees together, one hand in her lap, one still hovering near her face. I poured water from the carafe on my credenza. She took it with both hands. She didn't drink right away. She just held it. "I don't remember all of it," she said. "You don't need to." Her eyes came up sharp. "That's not reassuring." "It's true, Callum." Just my name, but the way she said it. Not as a competitor, not as a colleague, but as a person asking for something she hadn't planned to ask for. "You didn't embarrass yourself," I said. "You were upset. You drank more than usual. I drove you home. You asked me not to say anything." She closed her eyes. "God, Marga. What else do you want to know?" I thought about the car. The rain and slush on the windows, the wet Ottawa streets. Her voice so carefully controlled even when it shouldn't have had to be. "You said you weren't holding it together," I said. She went still. That was the thing she'd been afraid of. Not the drinking part, the honest part. Her eyes opened slowly. "I said that?" Yes. Did I say why? You told me about your mother. She was quiet for a long time. Then she covered her face with both hands. I leaned back and waited. There are people who fill silence because silence makes them uncomfortable. Margot had methodically dismantled that kind of person in strategy meetings for 18 months. I wasn't going to become one in my own office now. After a while, she lowered her hands. She's been declining faster than they expected, she said. Her voice had gone flat and careful in the way it goes when someone is controlling it on purpose. Last night, she called me Catherine. That was my sister's name. Catherine died in a car accident in 2013. A breath. My mom has said my name every single day of my life. 31 years. And last night, she looked at me on a FaceTime call and called me someone else. I'm sorry, I said. She nodded once, the way you nod when you've been accepting sympathy for long enough that it's become its own kind of task. She used to be a high school vice principal, Margot said. In Guelph. She ran the whole school, basically. The principal was semi-retired, everyone knew it was her. Sharp. Opinionated. She remembered every student's name, every staff member's birthday. A small fractured smile appeared and disappeared. She raised me like every soft edge was a liability. That sounded exactly like the woman who would have produced Margot Voss. Last night she couldn't remember mine, she said. The sentence landed between us without anywhere to go. No slides, no data, no reframe available. I understood then. I'm not holding it together. Hadn't been about the Dunmore contract. It had been about watching yourself disappear from someone's memory in real time. About the particular grief of losing a person who is still alive. I went back into that private room, Margot said. And everyone was laughing about the presentation. Brendan was talking about the celebration bonus. Andrea was making jokes about finally sleeping through the night. And I kept thinking, my mother just called me by the name of her dead daughter, and I'm standing here smiling because we won a government contract. Her voice cracked on the last word. She hated that it did. I could see her hating it. I didn't react to the crack. I reacted to what she'd said. That would have undone most people for a while, I said. Her jaw tightened. I don't get a while. Yes, you do. She looked at me. You don't understand. My whole life, the second I showed anything soft, someone in the room clocked it and filed it away. My mother taught me that herself. You're not weak, Margot. You're just not ready yet. That's what she used to say. A breath. It's hard to fall apart in front of someone who taught you falling apart was just a preparation failure. I almost said something about that. I didn't. She wasn't ready. Instead, I said, I didn't file it away. Her eyes held mine for a moment. I know, she said quietly. That's what threw me. She looked down at the water glass. When I saw that analyst pull out his phone last night, I thought, this is it. This is what I become. A clip. Something people forward to each other. Proof that Margot finally cracked. I felt something cold move through me. I kept it quiet. You didn't become that, I said. Because you stepped in. Yes. Why? It was a direct question, and unlike last night, she was sober. So I answered it properly. Because I know what it looks like when someone who carries everything suddenly can't hold one more thing. And I wasn't going to let someone turn that into content. Margot looked at me for a long moment. Then, from experience, I sat back. And because she had just given me something real, I gave her something back. My dad had a heart attack when I was 29, I said. I was in the middle of a client call when my sister texted me. I finished the call. Margot's face softened, just slightly. It took 11 more minutes, I said. He was fine. He recovered completely. But I finished the call before I even texted back. I looked at the window. I've never told anyone that. Not because it's shameful, I think, but because I've never fully stopped being angry at myself for it. She looked at me like she was seeing something she hadn't expected to find. You never seem like someone who carries things like that, she said. I know. That's the problem with being good at looking fine. She was quiet for a moment. Then, why tell me? I looked at her. Yesterday's blazer, eyes still red. The water glass held in both hands like something fragile. Because you asked, I said. Neither of us spoke for a while. The office outside kept moving. Phones, footsteps, someone down the hall laughing at something, probably not that funny. Then Margot took a sip of water and said, I came here this morning because I thought if you knew, you'd have leverage. That's not what this is. I know that now. How? She looked at me steadily. Because I'm still sitting here. That landed harder than it should have. Margot didn't stay in rooms she didn't feel safe in. Not ever. Before either of us could say anything else, my desk phone rang. I ignored it. Then her phone buzzed on the sofa beside her. She checked it, and I watched her face go still. "What?" I said. She turned the screen toward me. It was a message from Brendan. "Rough night? Don't worry. I'm sure it won't affect the director review. These things usually don't. Usually." I read it twice. Brendan hadn't just noticed. He was testing the edge of it, seeing if there was a handle on her worst night that he could pick up and carry into a boardroom. I looked at Margot. Her face had gone neutral, not the tired neutral from earlier this morning. This was something harder, something that had just found its footing. "He's bluffing," she said. "Maybe. He didn't see anything real. He thinks he did," I said. "And right now, that's more dangerous." Her eyes met mine. "The analyst," I said, with the phone. She nodded slowly. "I need to get ahead of this," agreed. She reached for the door. I stepped in front of it, not blocking, just slowing. She looked at me. "Move, Margot. You're about to walk into that hallway looking like you haven't slept, wearing yesterday's blazer with Brendan's message on your phone. He wants you reactive. I'm not reactive. You're human. Right now, that's the same thing to him." She looked like she wanted to argue. Then she didn't. She sat back down. I opened my laptop. "Forward me the message." "No. If I forward it, you're involved." "I'm already involved. I drove you home, Callum." Her voice sharpened. "You didn't do anything wrong last night. I'm not letting Brendan make you collateral because he thinks helping me is something you'd be embarrassed about." I looked at her. She had been crying 20 minutes ago. She was still trying to protect me from something I had already stepped into by choice. "That's considerate," I said. "Also impractical. Forward the message." She stared at me. Then something shifted in her face, and for a half second she almost smiled. She forwarded it. I saved it, screenshotted it, sent copies to my personal email. Then I texted Francine Okafor in HR, not dramatic, just, "Can you meet privately with Margot Voss and me this morning? There may be a conduct issue from last night's Dunmore dinner. Written messages involved." Francine replied in under 2 minutes. "Room 3C, come now. Don't discuss in the hallway." Margot read over my shoulder and exhaled. "Now it's official. Now it's documented," I said. "Which is better?" Before she could answer, her phone buzzed again. "Brendan. Just thinking about optics, obviously. Director decisions are visibility decisions. You know how it is." Then, 30 seconds later, "Might be worth taking yourself out of the running voluntarily. Fresh start next cycle. No one would think less of you." Margot went completely still. I felt my anger go cold. Not loud, not hot. The kind that knows exactly what it's looking at. "He put it in writing," I said. "He implied it. He said voluntarily step back from the director role. That's not an implication. That's a record." She stared at the screen. Then something settled in her expression, not the old composure she wore like armor. Something cleaner, something that had decided. "Room 3C, she said. Francine Okafor had the particular energy of someone who had heard too many versions of this story and was deeply tired of preventable stupidity. She had a legal pad, reading glasses, and a coffee she clearly hadn't had time to finish. Margot laid it out. Dinner, personal phone call, drinking more than usual, me driving her home, the analyst and the phone. Brendan's messages this morning, including the explicit suggestion that she withdraw from the director process. Francine listened without interrupting. Then she turned to me. "Did Ms. Voss ask you to take her home?" "No," I offered. I had seen she wasn't okay, and I had seen someone about to record her. "Did you enter her home?" "No." I walked her to her door. I waited until she had locked it. Then I left. Margot's eyes moved to me at that. I hadn't told her that part. Francine wrote something on her pad. "Did anyone else witness the recording attempt?" "2 junior analysts. Brendan may have been nearby. I can't confirm he saw it directly." France set down her pen. "Do not discuss this outside this room. Do not approach Brendan. Do not contact the analysts. I'll handle all of that." She looked at both of us. "I'll notify the managing partners that there is an open conduct review and that any conversation about either of your director candidacies tied to events from last night is frozen until we've determined whether what happened constitutes coercion or attempted professional retaliation." Margot let out a slow breath. "This is exactly what the policy exists for," Francine said, not unkindly. When we left HR, Margot stopped in the corridor near the stairwell. The door closed behind Francine. Then Margot leaned back against the wall and pressed her fingers to her eyes. "I hate this," she said. "I know, no, you don't." She dropped her hand. I hate that I needed someone last night. I hate that Brendan saw enough to try something. I hate that my mother is sick and I'm standing here running an HR process to prove I'm still fit for a leadership role. She looked at the ceiling. I've been managing other people's perception of my competence since I was 23 years old. I'm so tired of it. I stepped a little closer, not too close. You are fit for the role. You're my competition. Not for this, she went quiet. Why? She asked. It was the same question she'd asked in my office, but deeper now. Why the car? Why the message? Why HR? Why stand beside her when standing aside might have made my own path easier? I could have given her a clean professional answer. Integrity, workplace policy, basic decency. All of those were true. None of them were complete. So I said, because beating you only means something when you're at full strength. She looked at me. And because, I said quieter, I don't want a promotion badly enough to let someone use your worst week as a stepping stone. She held my gaze for a long moment. Then the stairwell door opened and a facilities guy walked through carrying a box of supplies, looked at us briefly, and kept going. We both exhaled. As we started back down the hallway, her hand brushed mine, just once. Not an accident, not a statement, just a touch that said, I heard you, I'm here, thank you. She couldn't say it out loud, so she said it that way. At 4:15, Francine called us back to room 3C. Brendan had denied everything poorly. One analyst confirmed that Brendan had encouraged the recording attempt. The other admitted a short clip had been taken, but said he'd deleted it after I'd stepped in. Francine had recovered enough from Brendan's message thread to verify the implied threat to Margot's candidacy. Brendan was removed from the Dunmore account. He was placed on a formal conduct review. By end of week, it was quietly understood he would not be staying at the firm past the quarter. His name was removed from the director shortlist immediately. Margot sat very still while Francine outlined the outcomes. When we left, she didn't look relieved. She looked exhausted in the way you look when something is over, but didn't need to happen in the first place. Then she said, I should go see my mum. In Guelph? She nodded, started toward the elevator, then stopped. Callum? Yeah. She turned. Her voice was quieter than I'd ever heard it, and unsteady in a way that I think she would have corrected yesterday without thinking. Would you drive out with me? She's home. My brother is there tonight, but he and my mom have a hard time right now. There's history there, and I don't want to walk in alone and have her look at me again and not. She stopped, pressed her lips together. I don't think I can do that by myself today. There were 10 easy reasons to say no. We were co-workers. We were competing for the same position. The day had already crossed more lines than either of us had planned for when we got up that morning. But Margot Voss was standing in an office corridor, asking not to be alone. I got my coat. She drove. Her car was clean, an older Civic, a Guelph Griffin's decal, half peeled off the back window. She drove with both hands on the wheel and the radio off, which felt right. We took the 417 west to the 416 to the 401. February fields, bare maples, the occasional Tim Hortons sign glowing through the gray. We didn't talk much for the first 40 minutes, and that was okay too. About halfway there, she said, you don't have to come inside. I mean it. Whatever today was, this isn't part of the job. What was today? I asked. She glanced over. Then I'll follow your lead. She was quiet. Then, you do that a lot. Know when to wait. I'm working on it, I said. She almost smiled. The almost was enough. Margot's mother lived on a quiet street in West Guelph, a red brick bungalow with a front garden that had been put to bed for winter under straw mulch. Everything about it said, someone cared about this place. Someone still did. Margot sat in the passenger seat for a moment after I pulled up, looking at the front door. She might not know who I am, she said. It's not every time. Some days she's completely clear. Some days she's somewhere else entirely. A pause. I never know which version I'm walking into. I didn't have anything useful to say, so I just said, ready when you are. A woman opened the door before we reached the steps. She had Margot's eyes, and Margot's posture in a sweater, buttoned unevenly, like she'd gotten dressed before she was fully awake. She looked at her daughter first, then at me. Mum, Margot said. This is Callum. We work together. Her mother, Vivienne, I'd learn later, held the door wider. Come in then. It's cold. The house smelled like lemon dish soap and something simmering on the stove. There were photos along the hallway. Margot at maybe 14 in a school debate photo. A ribbon in her hand. Margot at university graduation. the kind of smile that means I earned this. A woman in her 40s standing at a school podium with the ease of someone who had done that 1,000 times. Vivienne, years ago before. Vivienne herself was in the front sitting room, in a wingback chair near the window, a blanket across her legs and a crossword open on the side table. She looked up when we came in. Her eyes went to Margot. For one moment, nothing moved. Then Vivienne said, "Margot, sweetheart." Margot's breath went out of her. "You look cold," Vivienne added. "Sit down." Margot sat on the edge of the couch closest to the chair. Her mother looked at me. "Who are you?" "Callum Reed." "I work with Margot." "What kind of work?" "Infrastructure consulting. Transit contracts, mostly." "That sounds like something that matters, but nobody understands." "That's an accurate description." Vivienne studied me. "You drove her here." "I did." "She doesn't usually bring people home." A pause. "She used to, when she was young." Then she stopped. "People made her tired, I think." She looked at Margot. "Am I wrong?" "No," Margot said quietly. "I raised her to be self-sufficient," Vivienne said to me, as if explaining something. "I wasn't trying to make her lonely. Those aren't the same thing, but they can become the same thing without you meaning for it to happen." The room was very still. Margot looked at her mother carefully, like she wasn't sure how long this clarity would last and didn't want to waste a second of it. "Mum," she said, "how are you feeling today?" "Annoyed," Vivienne said. "Your brother reorganized my kitchen and now I can't find the tea I want. He means well, he's not helpful." She looked at her hands. "This morning was hard." "I know," Margot said. "I called you Catherine last night." Vivienne's voice had something underneath it. Not confusion, grief. I knew I had. I could feel it wrong even as I was saying it, and then I couldn't fix. Margot's jaw was tight. "It's okay, Mum." "It isn't," Vivienne said, simply. "I know my own daughter's name. 31 years. I know it." She touched the crossword on the table without opening it. "I just can't always reach it." Margot covered her mouth with one hand. "Hey," I said quietly. Both of them looked at me, slightly surprised I'd spoken. "She knew it was wrong," I said to Margot. "She said so herself. She knew." Margot's eyes were bright. Vivienne looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, "That's the right thing to say. I don't always manage it, neither do I." She picked up her crossword. Then she set it down again. "Margot told me about the job she's going for. The senior one. She should get it," I said. Margot stared at me. "Callum, she's the strongest candidate in the building," I said. "I mean that." Vivienne nodded slowly, as if confirming something she already believed. "She gets that from me," she said. "The drive. I believe it," I said. "The part where she makes everyone around her nervous, she gets from herself." Vivienne laughed. A short, real sound surprised out of her. Margot looked away, but not before I saw what that laugh did to her face. We stayed for 2 hours. Vivienne had tea. Margot's brother arrived, tense and tired in the particular way of someone managing a family crisis largely alone, and softened slightly when he saw Margot was not alone either. Vivienne's clarity held through most of it, slipping only once near the end when she asked Margot to tell your father something, and then caught herself and said quietly, "He's been gone 6 years. I know that. I just forget I know it sometimes." Nobody filled that silence. We let it be there. When we left, it was past 7. Dark, cold, the kind of February night that makes you feel like spring is theoretical. Margot stood beside the car for a moment, not moving. "She knew me," she said. "She did. She won't always." "No," Margot looked up at the sky. "I know how to handle things I can fight. Problems that have solutions. I'm very good at those." A pause. "This one doesn't have a solution." "I know," I said. "That's different. It's terrible," she said, very quietly. "It's just terrible and there's nothing to do about it." I didn't tell her it would be okay. It wouldn't always be. I didn't tell her it could have been worse. That wasn't useful. I just stood beside her in the cold, in the dark, on a quiet street in Guelph, and let it be terrible for a minute without trying to fix it. After a while, she said, "Thank you for coming." I wanted to. She looked at me. "Why?" The question again. Always the same question, and every time it went a little deeper than the last. "Because you asked," I said, "and because you don't ask easily." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "I don't know what to do with you, Callum Reed. You don't have to do anything with me tonight." "That's not what I mean." She turned toward me fully. Her face in the dark, the porch light from the house behind her, tired and red-eyed and more honest than I had ever seen her. "I mean, I don't know what category to put you in. You're not just a coworker anymore. You're not just the person I'm competing against. I don't have a word for what today made you. You don't need one yet, I said. She held my gaze. You keep saying patient things. It's a recent development. That almost smile again. Callum. Yeah. Don't go back to Ottawa tonight. A pause. There's a reasonable hotel on Stone Road, she said, not quite meeting my eyes. I looked it up while you were talking to my mum. I'm not asking you to. I just don't want to drive back in the dark, and I don't want you to drive back alone, and I don't want tonight to end with both of us on a highway trying to get away from something that already happened. I looked at her for a moment. All of it. The Dunmore dinner, the car, the office, her mother's sitting room, the way she'd said, I'm not holding it together in the dark of a back seat, and probably not even known she'd said it out loud. Okay, I said. She nodded once, exhaled. There's a decent Thai place on the way, she said. Lead the way. We found a small restaurant still open, half empty on a Tuesday night, and we ate and talked for 2 hours about things that had nothing to do with work. Her mother's crosswords, my dad's recovery, the particular absurdity of February in Ontario, whether the Dunmore project would actually change anything real for transit riders, or just look good in a press release. She laughed twice, genuinely, at things I said. I made note of what worked. I drove back to Ottawa the next morning. She texted me at noon, made it in. Francine confirmed Brendan's gone. You owe me a better argument on the phasing timeline, I replied. I always have a better argument, you just don't want to hear it. She sent back, that is the most accurate thing you've said since last night. The weeks that followed weren't simple. They rarely are when something real starts. We were still candidates for the same position. We were still in the same meetings, still pushing back on each other's numbers, still making each other work harder than either of us would have alone. The difference was that the point of it had changed. We weren't trying to make the other person smaller anymore. We were trying to make each other better, and both of us knew it, and neither of us said it, and that was fine. One evening in March, I found Margot in the office kitchen, staring at the counter with the look of someone who had been having a conversation inside their head for too long. Bad day? I said. Medium. My mum didn't know me when I called. I leaned against the counter. She didn't need a response to that. She needed someone to not perform a response. She knew me again by the end of the call, Margot said. 30 seconds before we hung up. She said Margot, and it was completely clear, and I didn't know whether to cry because she remembered or because I knew the next time it might not come back. I said nothing. After a while, she said, You're good at this. The silence. I'm less good at everything else. That's not true, and it's irritating that you say it. I almost smiled. Noted. She looked at me. I don't want to fall apart every time something with her gets hard and have you be the person I call. Okay. I want that. I just don't want that to be all of it. Then it won't be, I said. She studied me for a moment. You make very simple statements about complicated things. I've been told it should be annoying. And it's not, she said. That's what's annoying. When the director decision came, they called us both in on the same afternoon. Margot sat 2 chairs from me in a small meeting room with the managing partners. She was composed. She was always composed, but I could see the thing underneath it now. Not weakness, just weight. The weight of a year of work and a father's old standards, and a mother who sometimes forgot her name. They offered her the role. She didn't look at me immediately. When she did, I think she was waiting for something, the old rivalry coming back up, the part of me that had spent 18 months measuring myself against her. It didn't come. You earned it, I said. Her eyes went bright. She didn't cry. Not there. The Dunmore expansion, the managing partner continued, turning to me. We'd like you to lead the implementation phase under the new structure. That was more than I expected, and it was right. The roles fit us, if I was honest. Margot was a visionary. I was good at building things that held. She found me after in the empty hallway near the elevators. Don't be too gracious, she said. It's destabilizing. I'll be difficult tomorrow. Promise? Enthusiastically. That night, we walked along the Rideau River. Cold air, city lights reflected in black water, the kind of quiet that only comes after too much has happened in too few days. Halfway across a footbridge, Margot stopped. I'm scared, she said. Of the role? Of you. She turned toward me. Of this. I don't know how to be with someone who has seen that much of me. A pause. You've seen me cry twice. You've met my mother. You drove 4 hours and ate Thai food and slept in a hotel in Guelph because I didn't want to be alone. She shook her head. I don't know what to do with that kind of person. You don't have to know yet, I said. That's a good answer. She was quiet then. I don't only want you when things are falling apart. I looked at her. That sentence, the whole shape of it, what it cost her to say it. I took her hand. Then, let's figure out who we are when they're not. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she stepped a little closer, and the space between us stopped pretending to be professional. Okay, she said quietly, but you're buying coffee. Done. She didn't smile, exactly. But something in her face settled, in a way I had only seen once before. In her mother's sitting room, when Vivienne had said her name clearly, and Margot had understood, for a moment, that clarity was still possible, that it could come back, that you could still be known by the people who mattered, even in the middle of loss. We walked back to shore. Ottawa at night, cold and lit and moving, indifferent to all of it in the way cities are. Francine was informed once the reporting structure was clear. No one collapsed. The Dunmore contract launched on schedule. Margot was a good director. Demanding, fair, the kind of leader who never asked for work she wasn't willing to do herself. We fought constantly about strategy, which was useful, and then we went home and left the arguments in the conference room where they belonged. Her mother's Alzheimer's progressed, the way it does, not in a straight line, but in a slow and irregular loosening. There were clear weeks and hard months. The first time Vivienne met me at the door and said, "Callum, come in, the tea's on." Without any hesitation, I had to take a moment in the front hall before I could answer her. Vivienne, for her part, seemed to have decided I was acceptable without telling me directly. One afternoon, she looked at me over her crossword and said, "You don't try to fix things that aren't yours to fix." "I try not to," I said. "That's harder than it sounds," she said. "Most people can't manage it." 2.5 years after the night of the Dunmore dinner, I proposed in the most undramatic way possible. In the kitchen of the apartment we had been sharing for 8 months. On a Sunday morning when Margot was still in her robe and had just told me my revised approach to a client brief was marginally less wrong than the last version. "Marry me," I said. She looked up from the brief. "That was abrupt," she said. "I've been waiting for a good moment." "There aren't any. You just had a good sentence." She stared at me. Something moved through her face, surprise, then something softer, then the beginning of something she was trying not to show, which meant it was real. "That's a terrible reason," she said. "It's an honest one." Her eyes went bright. She looked down at the brief, then back up at me. "Yes," she said, quietly. Like she was giving me something she had kept for a long time. I crossed the kitchen and she stood up, and that was that. Later, when people asked us how it started, Margot usually said, "He drove me home in a snowstorm and didn't make me explain myself." I'd say, "She showed up at my office the next morning and ruined every professional boundary I'd ever set, and I was grateful for it." Both of those were true. But the truest version was this. I fell in love with my work rival. Not on the night I drove her home in the snow, and not the morning she cried in my doorway, and not in her mother's sitting room in Guelph. I fell in love in all the moments between those things, in every pause and every silence, and every time she let me stay in the room when she didn't have to let anyone stay at all. If you've ever had to hold yourself together in a work meeting while something in your life was quietly falling apart, or if you've ever met the person you thought was your competition and realized they were the only one who actually understood you, tell me about it in the comments. If this one meant something to you, leave a like, and I'll see you in the next one.